All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our Remesh webinar. It's a very engaging live Remesh session. And I'm Emma from Remesh, here to introduce Anthony, who is our VP of People Science, and he will be walking us through. And make sure you see the Remesh session on the other side of the screen. So make sure to watch that because we'll be asking you live questions so you can engage with that. And all right, ready.
All right, we move the slide ahead. We can move again. So this is me. Hi, everyone. I'm Anthony Caputo. I was recently hired as Remesh's VP of People Science. For those of you who don't know, Remesh is a startup company here in New York City that really focuses on having conversations with large groups of people. So this could take any form. It could be a CEO talking to the whole company. It could be a group of researchers talking to a sample about market research. But really what we're trying to build here is just one way that we can have a collective conversation and leverage the intelligence of groups as a whole. So we partnered with HR.com and produced this report of the State of Employee Engagement 2018. We can send this report out to you. It has a lot of great findings after today's session. So this is a little bit more about Remesh. So like I said, we are one of the first platforms that allows large groups of people to have a seamless conversation between each other. We can converse with up to 1,000 people in one session. So think of this as essentially a large virtual focus group where a moderator, one person, can have a conversation with up to 1,000 people. And data is analyzed, captured, and calculated in real time. We've started working with a whole bunch of great companies, mostly in the market research space. We've been moving more into doing employee research and organizational research. But just some of the names that we've worked with Barclays, we've worked with Deloitte, we've worked with NASCAR, we've worked with Mercer. So we're definitely starting to build the brand. Emma, who you just met, is the moderator for today's session. As we're going to be running a live session just to show you what the Remesh technology is capable of. That whole session in the back end is going to be run by Emma. So she'll be the one sending you guys questions. She'll be the one sending you comments and feedback. So like I said, Emma's going to be the moderator, and really participating in a Remesh session happens in 3 steps. The first one is that you're going to see a question appear on the screen. When that question is asked, we're going to ask you to type in your response. It's mostly qualitative data, so open-ended response. Type your answers into a session window. After that, you're going to be taken to a voting exercise where you're going to be shown pairs of everyone else's comments. And you're going to be asked to vote on which one you agree with more or which one you agree with less. At the end of that voting exercise, you're going to see a rank ordered list of all the top responses that people preferred in order of preference. And don't worry, everyone will see everyone else's comments, but this is completely anonymous and no individual response can be traced back to any individual. So like I said, at the end of the session, we can send out just kind of like an overview of the session. You could also get a copy of the HR.com report. So that's it. Just email us if you want a copy of that report. All right, so as we jump into this, I want to hit a nice cadence of talking about research, talking about both academic and practitioner, as well as getting feedback from the audience. Throughout the presentation, you're going to be seeing these slides that have cues on them. The cue slide means that you should get ready for a question. Because once we launch the Remesh session, we'll be kind of showing you questions after you see these cue slides pop up. So just to start, let's start with a practice question. So the first question we're going to ask, and we usually typically ask this for all the people who participate in a Remesh session first, just so they get their feet wet and just a good understanding of how the system works. So you're going to see pop up in the Remesh session, if I had $1 million, what would you do with that $1 million? So participate now. I believe that the question was just sent. We're typically going to give people about 2 minutes to respond to every question. As I said earlier, all of the data is going to be calculated in real time. So as soon as that 2-minute window has closed, we should have a ranked ordered list of everyone's comments in order of preference. So take some time now, enter your responses, do some voting. Throughout the whole presentation, I'll be holding my computer here. I'm gonna use that really to monitor the responses that come in. All right. So Emma, do you mind sharing some of the top responses that came from that question?
Sure thing. We got, so far, I would save it for my college education. I'm a personal fan of retire and make sculptures, but top response is invest.
Interesting. Great. All right. So we're going to be doing that, I guess, for the duration of the presentation. I guess we're going to jump into the content that we wanted to cover. And just to set some context, so over the course of the next, I would say 30 minutes, I'm going to be walking through these 3 parts. So today's agenda is, first, I'm going to talk to you about what is employee engagement, definitions, kind of how it's seen in the eyes of academics and practitioners. Talk about the importance of employee engagement within your organization, within the general kind of workplace as it evolves. And lastly, I'm going to be talking about how people are measuring it and how that kind of dovetails with the role of AI and HR. So again, 30 minutes should be able to cover those 3 topics. All right, so part 1, what is employee engagement? Well, really the goal here is I want to paint a clear picture of what an engaged employee looks like, who gives their best kind of discretionary effort at work, and who has an emotional commitment to the organization and its objectives. If we go ahead, I think we're going to go into our first kind of question on employee engagement. And the question here is going to be, just generally, without having too much knowledge or muddying the water, how would you personally define employee engagement? What is engagement to you? So it should be a similar exercise as before. You'll see a number of the opportunity to provide your answer. You'll see everyone else's answers, and then we'll review some of the top responses. So we're just sitting tight here until the response window has closed. Good. We got about 25 seconds left. Excellent. All right. Thank you for that response. Before we jump into your responses, I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of engagement. So engagement was a concept that was first introduced to the workplace, to organizations in 1990 by a professor at Boston University, William Kahn. And in Kahn's definition, at its simplest form, it would look like when employees lean into their work, right? Versus just going on autopilot. Now, employee engagement, as defined by Kahn and is commonly understood within the industry and within academia, is that employee engagement is the extent to which employees are emotionally, intellectually, and behaviorally invested in their work, their job, and their organizations. Let's flip to your responses. So some of the top responses that came up here were to understand the relationship between the organization and employees, this combination of excitement and productivity, feeling emotionally, rationally, and actively connected to your organization. So you're already seeing a little bit of similarities. Those were the top three responses. But as we look at your responses, it does very nicely kind of dovetail with the HR.com report. So one of the findings, so we surveyed 717 HR managers, and of those 717 managers, 84% of them agreed that the employee engagement is the willingness to give one's best work, also known as discretionary effort, and having an emotional commitment to the organization and its objectives. And I really like how the responses that came in, the responses, the kind of dominant logic around the evolution of engagement all kind of dovetails with the findings that we just went over. If we go a little bit further, a lot of leaders, this is a big importance to organizations. And one of the biggest leaders that is well known is Simon Sinek. And if we go to his definition of engagement, he defines engagement as a person who feels appreciated. A person who feels appreciated will always do more than what is expected. And really, that's the essence of engagement as well, right? Appreciation, going above and beyond what's normally expected of you. Now, while Kahn's work established what engagement was, he was the first person to actually define engagement. All your definitions that you provided, all the people that we surveyed from HR.com, way back when it first came out of William Kahn's work, it wasn't really popular, and it took a little bit of a while for employee engagement to gain widespread interest among practitioners. So one of the first people that actually picked it up were people from Gallup, and they published 2 books that really made the concept popular at the turn of the century. Now, since they've published those 2 books, First Break All the Rules is one of the books that's well known. A number of definitions emerged. People started getting really interested in the concept of engagement, and both practitioner and academic definitions emerged. And it started making it really challenging to pin down one truth of what engagement really is. But despite all of that, there is kind of one truth. And that one truth is that there is a demonstrated empirical relationship between employee engagement and a variety of different business outcomes. And those business outcomes can be lower levels of turnover and absenteeism, higher levels of productivity, and higher levels of customer satisfaction. So at least at a minimum, we can say that there is a demonstrated empirical link between engagement and performance. Now, that kind of sets the stage for the next section, which is the importance of employee engagement. So in this section, what we really want to do is just establish the importance of it as a key driver of performance in a large company. Now, a lot of the data you're going to see here is going to be sourced from both HR.com, the report that we're going to be passing around, and the results from the Remesh live session. So first question, brace yourself, is how would you describe the level of importance placed on engagement within your own organization? Essentially asking, is it important? Are people focused on this? So if you go to your toggle back into the Remesh session, we're starting to ask these questions again, go through that voting exercise. We have about 1.5 minutes left to provide responses. So as some of the responses are coming in, I'll start reading some of the top responses that are starting to emerge. So one of the top responses are that engagement is very important to defining our success as an organization. Another top response is everyone talks about it and wants it. Some people on the other end of the spectrum are saying that it's not important just yet. They wish it was. They wish it were important, but they're still gaining popularity within the organization. But then on the other hand, some people are saying it's one of the top 3 most important things or metrics that people look at. Okay, I'll give you guys a little more time to focus. You have about 30 seconds left. Excellent. Thank you for those responses. Let's review some of the top responses together here. So the #1 response that came out was that employee engagement is important and people are focused on it. However, they think that this person thinks that it's more of a talking the talk and not walking the walk, right? So we see this kind of come up a lot with senior leadership as well, and employees and managers, right? Are they putting their money where their mouth is, right? Do they have that level of integrity of doing what they say they're going to do, right? And if employee engagement is important to people and people are focused on it, are they really committed to leveraging the importance of it? That was the top response. Another one, and these kind of dovetail with all of them, is that everyone talks about it and wants it, but no one has a great way to measure it. Interesting. We'll get to measurement a little bit later. Another respondent feels that it's very important and there's a dedicated resource on the team to help monitor and maximize employee engagement, right? So this is another thing we're seeing organizations do, are kind of sourcing engagement champions within the organization to help kind of drive the engagement impact. So I'm going to ask another question here. And this is going to be a poll question. So you're going to have only 30 seconds to respond. It's a 5-point scale. Essentially, I want to know if you look from the top down, right? Because we do know that senior leadership tends to be the microcosm of what an organization is. Are those senior leaders in your organization, do they recognize the value of employee engagement? I do think that based on some of the responses that came in previously, we're going to see that by and large, people do think that their senior leadership recognizes the value, but let's wait for responses to see what the survey says. So voting just started. You have about 15 seconds left to provide a response. All right, so data's in. By and large, people agreed or strongly agreed. I'm looking here that about 80% or 8 out of 10 of you of the people who responded agreed or strongly agreed that engagement is seen as a valuable contribution to the organization from senior leadership. Last question, and in this section, we saw this come out from the last open-ended question we asked, but if engagement is recognized as a very important part of the employee experience, and senior leadership teams recognize the value of employee engagement, it naturally leads me to ask the next question, and that is, do senior leaders, managers, know how to build a culture of engagement? I'm going to ask you to respond to that. Now, these last two questions are part of a larger study that has been conducted and completed in 2014 by the Engagement Institute. The Engagement Institute is a community of learning by practitioners and academics that come together various points of the year to discuss different matters of engagement. Okay, it's hosted by the Conference Board, Deloitte, and Mercer Sirota. So let's see what you guys said to this. All right, so we're finding here that results are much lower, right? So if we take a step back and look at the last poll, most people, 8 out of 10 of you, agreed that engagement is important. Senior leaders think engagement is important. But when we asked if they know how to build that culture of engagement, only 28% of you agreed, right? And it was actually tied as the top response with neutral. So people are neutral and slightly positive about their senior leaders' ability to create that culture of engagement. And this kind of dovetails nicely with kind of the results that we saw earlier, and the fact that since employee engagement is so kind of muddy in terms of the definition, it's hard to measure, right? And if you don't have concrete ways to measure the things that you want to see improvements on, it could be really hard to make those changes. When we surveyed the 717 HR leaders in the HR.com report, the results kind of complement the results we see here. So over 90% of the people we surveyed believes that there's a solid evidence linking engagement to performance. So that definitely is or demonstrates the importance of employee engagement. But only 2/5 of the people we surveyed in the report say that their senior leaders prioritize employee engagement. All right. So very important, hard to prioritize, and a little bit more neutral to slightly positive about their ability to actually create change or drive engagement forward. Which leads us into naturally into our third section, which is all about going to be driving and measuring employee engagement. So the goal here is I really want to just try to establish at least the driving factors of engagement. And these could be anything from collaboration, listening, trust, all wrapped up in relationships with people and culture. So let's go back to that Simon Sinek quote for a second. Simon said that a person who feels appreciated will always do more than expected, right? Employee engagement, if we want to, really distills itself down to making people feel appreciated, respected, and having a good experience at work. I want you guys, everyone, I can't see you, but I would really like if everyone participating would close your eyes for a moment. I want you to think about an employee, a single employee, colleague, boss, direct report. And I want you to think about that employee within your organization. And I want you to kind of pick somebody who you personally appreciate a lot. Okay. Now that's somebody's highly engaged, constantly giving discretionary effort, somebody you have a good relationship with, somebody you trust, somebody that trusts you. I want you to visualize that person for a minute. Now the question I want to ask here is, as you visualize that person, as you have this person in your head, what are the characteristics that define your relationship with that person? What are some of the ways you make that person feel appreciated and looked out for? Please take a minute or two and share your thoughts. We just posted the question in the Remesh session. Now, one of my favorite, I would say, characterization or drivers of engagement really comes down to Khan's original conception of what engagement is, right? Is this person invested emotionally? Is this person invested cognitively? And is this person invested behaviorally in their work? If you have that person in your head, what are some ways that you would want to make that person feel appreciated? What are some ways that you would look out for that person? If you are that person, how would you want to be treated? What are some ways that make you feel appreciated? Got about 35 seconds left in the voting process. All right, so let's look at the top responses together. One of the first responses that came out of this voting exercise was that this person, what are some ways that you made that person feel appreciated or looked out for? The top response here was trust, transparency, collaboration, and growth mentally, right? So growth and development, intellectual development. These are some of the ways that would define your relationship with that person. Let's see some of the other responses. Mutual respect, investment in each other's growth and well-being, collaboration, open-mindedness, respect. So a lot of respect, a lot of trust, and a lot of confidence in each other's ability to co and work together. Now, according to the HR.com report, we asked a similar question. And one of our findings is that appreciation, specifically appreciation, can be attributed to collaboration, listening, and trust. Now, the ability to foster collaboration is a major differentiator between highly engaged and less engaged organizations. Just the ability to build trust by being fair is another differentiator. Leaders in more highly engaged organizations are better at listening to their employees, getting feedback, and maintaining a positive work culture. Now, a lot of those findings that came out of that report correspond very closely and nicely with the responses you provide. So there is kind of some inter-rater reliability there. Move a little ahead a bit here. I want you to remember that employee you appreciated at work, right? That same employee. Now I want you to think about how you may go about appreciating 500, 1,000, 5,000 employees, right? It might be easy or to think about a way that you can appreciate or work with somebody on a one-on-one basis. But in other words, is this scalable? It's pretty difficult to get right, and appreciation isn't that inherently scalable. So one of the next questions I want to ask is that as OD practitioners and specialists, HR managers, and communication executives that we have on the phone here, What is the best way to scale appreciation, or what ideas do you have about kind of strategies within your own organization that you can scale appreciation, that you can scale or improve on the employee experience? I'll give you that question now. We're looking for ways to optimize or scale one-on-one appreciation to large groups of people. It might be very easy for a CEO or any kind of senior leader to maintain constant FaceTime or contact with their direct reports or their immediate team. It's very, very difficult for that same person to show that same level of appreciation and support for the entire organization or their entire business unit. So some of the votes coming in now. Encourage employees to work outside of their immediate department. Okay. Waiting for some more to come in. Got about 20 seconds left. All right, so let's look at the top response. So it looks like about 61% of you agree that training and culture building to get alignment from all levels of managers so that there's only ones carrying out appreciation on teams. Makes sense, and that seems to be the kind of dominant thought here. Some other responses are leveraging technology, encouraging employees to work outside of their immediate departments. So all very good contributions there. Now, we asked again the same question in this HR.com report. And when we asked this question, only 28%, only 28, so 3 out of 10 people agreed that their managers are equipped and highly skilled at fostering a culture of engagement. So in this section, we've learned that driving engagement really boils down to making employees feel appreciated at scale. It really looks like people are invested cognitively, emotionally, behaviorally in their work. And the key ingredients of this kind of formula of engagement we're seeing coming out of the conversation are fostering collaboration, building trust, and being fair, and listening carefully to feedback. We've also learned that it's really important to have senior leadership as a sponsor to build these kinds of relationships and drive engagement across all levels of the organization. This puts you essentially as an HR manager in a really tough spot, so we feel for you. But I do think it's safe to say that driving engagement in a large organization is a really complex challenge. And the tools and resources to accomplish that task are limited. So let's move on to measuring engagement. At the beginning of our time today, we learned that about 84% of the HR managers surveyed in the report believe that employee engagement is strongly linked to performance. Yet about half of you, or about half of organizations we surveyed, don't even measure engagement. And I think we saw some of this come out of some of the responses in the beginning of the session, where they say that it's very easy to demonstrate engagement's impact. It's very important, but it's very hard to measure, right? And that kind of goes back to not having this one definition set. So I want to ask you guys another question, and that's really about how does your organization measure employee engagement? Okay. Organizations measure employee engagement in a number of ways. They could be census, once a year, entire organizational-wide engagement surveys. It could be shorter pulse surveys, stay interviews, focus groups. How does your organization measure employee engagement? I know, and I'm seeing some of this come through. I think we have some Remesh employees in this session. We actually use Remesh, this kind of technology, this platform internally every Friday to run a session with all of our employees to really touch on issues that we want kind of broad scale organizational buy-in or just general feedback. We've had our CEO ask for specific feedback on his leadership. We've had certain teams use Remesh within Remesh to really understand nuances between teams. So we really leverage this platform internally, and it's been very impactful. Since we are so small, we're only about 30 employees now. It is a challenge to run organizational-wide census surveys because we are at such an inflection point in our growth. But this Remesh kind of technology is a great way to just dial into a small team and get real-time results into the sentiment they're feeling and kind of how things are going internally. So you got about 10 seconds left. The responses for people who provided a response. Top response are engagement surveys, pulse surveys, and pulse check-ins. Love to dig into more of that. We also have, we take a survey every quarter. That was one of the top responses. Daily check-ins, allowing for transparency, giving employees confidence to speak up. So that's good. Surveys, one-on-ones with bosses, team meetings. Those were all the top responses. Now, when we asked people, HR professionals, HR managers in this HR.com survey, we find that 53% of organizations actually do measure engagement. But interestingly, 71% of the organizations with a headcount of 1,000 or more measure engagement. So it does seem like an initiative that's kind of supported and owned a lot easier by larger organizations, and that could just be a resource thing. But it's important to note that you don't need to be an organization of a headcount of 1,000 or more to really leverage the impact of engagement. The next question we want to talk about is cadence, right? Because we have the top responses and kind of the scene across companies is that an organization-wide census survey is kind of the tried and true traditional way to measure engagement. But there's a number of ways to survey your whole organization. And I think cadence is one of those important things to take into account. So the next question is, how often does your organization measure employee engagement? Is it a continuous thing, real time, every day? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it annually? I'm only going to give you 30 seconds for this one. It could just be this is a closed-ended survey question. Just select your best response on that. All right, so the dominant logic here is that annually engagement is measured. Surprisingly, right after that is never. So 30% of respondents don't measure engagement at all, versus the 40% who do it annually. 10% do it monthly, 10% do it weekly, 10% do it all the time, an ongoing basis. We also have no people who indicated that they measure it twice a year or quarterly. Now, when we asked this question to HR professionals, 77% of them said that they use formal engagement surveys as their primary method of measuring engagement. And this tells us that organizations really do value statistically significant insights that come from this method. And not surprisingly, when we take this a step further, a whopping 97% of organizations use exit interviews or one-on-ones with managers to really capture the deep qualitative insights only achievable with the conversation. Now, this is something that we want to do with Remesh. And it's one of the kind of core foundations that the platform was built off of, right? Enabling leaders, managers, and employees to capture deep qualitative insights with the conversation, right? And doing this at scale. So if we do ask the question, because there are flaws to traditional kind of survey research, right? It's idiosyncratic, it's one point in time, it's measuring the whole organization, or it's a subset of the organization, but there are flaws to that. And there are kind of challenges when you're trying to choose the best way to measure, right? So when we ask, I want to ask it out to the group now, is that, can you think of any ways to improve how your organization measures engagement, right? There's kind of like this ideal state, right, and the current state. So if you put yourself in this current state kind of mentality, what would you want to do to change to get to that ideal state, right? Some people might already be there, and some people might have ideas on how to get there. So if you can please indicate or respond to the question now. I have about 2 minutes. One thing we usually see, but I wouldn't say that this is kind of best practice, is that a lot of organizations do kind of one point in time census surveys, right? So you're surveying the whole entire organization on a number of different dimensions. And then what they've done is they kind of take the results from that census and annual engagement survey and follow up with short pulses throughout the year, right? So that can look like if, say, efficiency was one of the things that your organization scored low on that came out of your annual engagement survey. You might want to follow up with that efficiency kind of low score by measuring kind of different aspects of efficiency, or digging into that with the pulse survey over time. So kind of going off of what we said earlier, and you have about 10 seconds left in the voting process. So I'll give you actually that 10 seconds. So when we ask the group, is there any ways that you would improve on measuring engagement? The strongest or the most popular response was that someone thinks that there's a disconnect between the companies and their employees, and having a conversation between leaders and employees is very important, right? Now, one-on-one conversations are important. They're personal and they're relational, but they're very limited in scope, right? Deep impact, but low coverage. Formal surveys, like we said earlier, on the other hand, they can capture tremendous amounts of quantitative data, and has a wide coverage, right? Because you can survey the whole organization at one point in time, but completely misses the mark when it comes to the personal, relational kind of moment-to-moment experience of employees. And often, organizations who want to do this research take months to analyze and formalize a response after a survey closes. So by that time, that lengthy silence, right? That not having data immediately after a survey closes, people might have already left. The organization could have already changed. So when it comes to getting those insights, kind of getting to the core issues of the organization as it is still pertinent, you guys as HR professionals are faced with the trade-off between qualitative understanding, right, through conversations, through interviews, through one-on-ones, and deep quantitative insights, right, through formal surveys. Thankfully, AI is now a thing, and it's changing the game and creating new possibilities for HR and just humans in general. So I think to cap off today's conversation, I do want to take a look at how AI is playing a role in employee engagement. This is just an overview of what we just said. All right, so I think no matter how you spin it, no matter how you look at it, the world is changing, right? Technology is disrupting the way that we think, the way that we act. The workforce is becoming more globalized. Employees are having new needs and expectations, specifically around flexibility and work-life balance. And one of the most biggest, I would say, changes we're seeing in the workplace are demographic shifts. So specifically around generations at work. This was research that was done by Pew, and it basically says that right now we have about 5 generations in the workplace. So how do you manage like those dynamics is a big question, right? How are different generations in the workplace, specifically millennials, affecting the employee experience? And are there new ways of working that are preferable to different groups of employees? So remote work, flexible work schedules, and really the rise of artificial intelligence is one of the most important kind of contributions to help facilitate these demographic shifts and technological disruptions. Some of the disruptions we're finding are creating real big challenges for organizations, specifically around attracting, retaining, and engaging employees. Now, this was some of the research that was done by the Engagement Institute and the Conference Board, which basically said when they surveyed a bunch of CEOs, and we're pulling this from the CEO Challenge, they indicated that a CEO indicated their top kind of challenge that they face on a daily basis is attracting, retaining, and engaging top talent. So it's really clear in today's workforce how important communication and preparing for future disruptions has become. And this is really why we think Remesh and AI could be such an integral tool for improving the employee experience. As you've experienced today, Remesh really enables leaders, managers, and employees to enter real-time dialogue with each other. And it really lets you kind of discover what drives engagement in the experience of employees and organizational performance in real time. Now, we're not saying that AI is going to take over. We're not saying that AI is really where it needs to be as a paradigm, because AI really isn't at the point where it can replace human cognition, right? It could really be used and it could be leveraged probably most effectively by helping a person or giving a person the ability to make more informed decisions. Now, I'm quoting a lot of my colleagues here, especially here at Remesh, because we do feel passionately about using AI to augment the way that we experience the world. One of the ways that this could be seen in organizations, we're going to go through a number of these, but the first one you see on your screen is mood monitoring. So this is really all about emotional recognition for videos and interviews, right? So using AI in the selection process. Video interviews have become very common in the recruitment process, and it's really, AI is really helping or evolving the space to become more precise and trustworthy. There's a lot of technologies out there, such as PANA, that can detect if an organization is cheating, if a candidate is cheating in an interview, a video interview, because it's able to track what they're looking at, okay? If they're reading a cue card or if they're not paying attention, or similar situations where their body language might be off. So using AI in that way is a very interesting way to leverage it. Another way we're seeing this is personalized career development paths. So technologies such as Axonify and Ostream created personalized and adaptive experiences for career learning, so employees can really fill the knowledge gaps that they need, as well as work on their skills on their path to management and growth and development moving forward. Another way that we're seeing this is that using AI, it's a really good platform to capture both qualitative and quantitative employee feedback in real time, right? So how do you achieve deep relational qualitative understanding that you get of a conversation, but scaling that with the quantitative power of surveying a whole organization? Now, we really do think that a technology like Remesh, using a live chat platform to engage with hundreds of employees at once, and then using that AI component to analyze and segment the responses that come in, is a really effective process that replaces surveys, the traditional kind of closed-ended surveys, and allows employees to give their honest, unrestrained, and open-ended answers, right? Any kind of issue or challenge is always, in this kind of always-on workplace, evolves so quickly that an annual or even quarterly employee feedback survey might not be kind of the end-all be-all to measuring the employee experience. We're going to close today's session with one more question. And that question is, what do you guys think of the 3 case studies? So we provided, and I could go over them again, but based on those case studies, what other roles do you see AI will play in the future of human resources? And again, to go over those case studies, we're talking about mood monitoring as a kind of a recent push in the AI HR space. Second one is personalized career development paths. And third are capturing qualitative and quantitative feedback in real time. Keep on typing in your responses there. See a lot of interest in AI, especially how AI and the impact of artificial intelligence could have when partnered with the human brain. Got about 40 seconds left in the voting process. As voting is coming to a close, I'll just talk about some of the top responses here. So there's a lot of favorability around the case studies. One person indicated that, especially for a large organization, AI could be hugely valuable in understanding how a large group of people are feeling and what's most important. Again, a lot about the AI-human partnership, and performance management came up middle of the road. So that's it. That was today's webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We'd love to send you the full hr.com report and show you a little bit more about our platform and the insights that we've gained from today's conversation. Could also share a little bit more about the experience we have using Remesh internally. But simply drop us your name and an email in the form that you'll get after this webinar, and we'll slot some time in this week or early next week to show you around, have a conversation, give you a more in-depth demo of Remesh. But if isn't anything else, thank you, and have a great day, guys.